This is the third of our short thoughts on suffering and COVID. And we come to the bit we've probably all been waiting for, which is where we find hope. Many questions have been asked during the pandemic. How long until the schools fully reopen? How long until I can buy that all-important new pair of jeans? How long before I can visit my grandchildren? Each of these questions recognises that there are aspects to life which have been changed by the lockdown, and that a loss has been felt. But these questions, and others like them, imply that when certain conditions have been met, certain actions are possible, when people can be met and they can be hugged, and when we can meet together as God's people again, things will be back to normal. Then we can go back to getting on with our lives. This is a poor hope. Indeed, it's a wrong hope. In his poem East Coker, T.S. Eliot writes this: "I said to my soul, be still, and wait without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing." Much of what is articulated about the end of the lockdown is hope for the wrong things. It is little more than a desire to return to the status quo ante, to the way in which things were before, a hope which, in biblical terms, is no hope at all. We have fallen into the trap that Eliot mentions. So in some ways, Eliot is right. However, in other important ways, he's wrong, and fundamentally wrong, because there is hope. And here again, the literary form of lament can be our guide and our helper. It is extremely rare for a psalm of lament to end on a note of hopelessness. In some ways, the Book of Lamentations does this, as does Psalm 88, but in general, they follow the pattern that Psalm 22 does, the psalm we mentioned last time. In the midst of desolation, of abandonment by God, the psalmist encounters the Holy One who is seated on the throne. Now, this encounter does not change the reality of the psalmist's situation. He immediately goes on to say, "I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people." It does, though, change the overall context of his suffering. It is a suffering which in some ways will find an answer. When is not yet made clear, but an answer in the revelation of who God is in his holiness and his sovereignty. We're back to Job. As the psalm continues, the writer comes to understand that God has not despised or scorned the suffering of his afflicted one. The situation has not changed, but the faithful writer's understanding, his perspective, has. And this leads to the end of the psalm, where hope comes fully into play, and it is an eschatological hope, a hope for the future. The psalmist, having encountered God, the source of all hope, can now look to a future where all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. This is the true hope that we must have in times of suffering. It's not a hope that the suffering will pass, though we should work tirelessly to reduce and remove the suffering of others. It is instead to recognise that the mission of God, Jesus' mission, will not be complete until the vision that the psalmist has at the end of that psalm becomes a reality. This must be our hope. Not a cure for COVID-19, though that would be nice. Not the possibility of foreign holidays, though they may be welcome. Our hope must be in the completion of the mission of God, that the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Our hope must be the vision of Revelation, when worship resounds eternally around the throne of God, worship that comes from every nation, tribe, people and language. And until that time, the cry of the people of God must be, how long? How long until the good news has been proclaimed to all the poor? How long before all the broken-hearted are unbound? How long before all the captives have been proclaimed free? How long before the prisoners are released from darkness? How long until the blind see?